You've probably found yourself in a situation like this a lot recently playing Escape from Tarkov.
Why won't you die?
And it kinda sucks. It doesn't feel good to shoot someone seemingly a million times and them not die. But what if I told you that this doesn't suck and that armor is not OP at all, it's just too available? What if I told you that the state of the armor is really a symptom of some of Tarkov's biggest problems and there are solutions out there that simultaneously increase the reward and enjoyment more casual players get and also give the grinders and no-lifers the endgame that they've been asking for all these years and does all of that in a way that ultimately respects the time of all players? I might be insane, and I'm definitely too invested in this damn game, but if you bear with me for a 20-minute yap session, hopefully I will explain what I mean. Also, as a quick disclaimer, this is obviously just all my opinion, and I'm not trying to use that as a cop-out. I actually really want to know at the end of this what you think or what I missed. Let's just do that in a healthy adult way. The armor system has obviously been going through quite a few changes recently. Patch 0.14 brought the complete overhaul of the armor system, and while it was definitely a much more realistic system with a lot more ways to engage with it, it also brought with it some wild inconsistencies when it came to time to kill, and a lot more instances where one bullet could take you down.
This is an AKM with 7.62x39 HP rounds. All the shots you're about to see are all chest. They are not head or throat. That is an Osprey with level 6 plates. This is a Gen 4 Assault. This is a Red Up. This is a Slick level 6.
Recently, they updated that armor system to increase the size of the hitboxes, making it harder to get one-tapped. And this had the side effect of increasing the time to kill, so much so that a lot of people think that we might need buffs to some of the ammos, or that this was a bit of an overcorrection and that the armor needs a little bit of a nerf. It's worth noting that the armor didn't actually get buffed in terms of how much damage it can take, only the hitboxes were increased so that many more of the shots coming at you are now hitting your armor instead of bypassing it. Now, I definitely agree that there are plenty of situations where the armor seems to be super tanky and that can create some really unfun encounters. But the more I thought about it, the more I think that these scenarios are actually indicative of a completely different problem. I think that the armor and its capabilities are actually in a really good spot, but there is just way too much high tier armor available to the players. Right now, you can buy, barter, or craft 18 different level 5 or 6 armors per trader reset, and you can buy or barter for 21 class 5 or 6 plates. Now, some of those barters might be locked behind quests, and some of them are definitely pretty terrible value, but it ultimately means that as long as you have the funds, you can virtually never stop running class 5 or 6 armors. I literally can't die enough to run through all of this in one trader reset, which is one of the reasons why the loot economy is so centered around money and treasure items that are valuable. We are often dropping good gear, guns, or attachments for more treasure items because we know that we can just buy those things back with all the money that we make. This got me thinking a lot about item rarity and the distribution of gear throughout a wipe. Ideally, we would see gear on a bell curve. Most of the people would have mid-tier gear and ammo and would sometimes run into low-level players and sometimes run into really high-tier players. As the wipe progresses, this curve would move towards the right, but ideally never hit the wall. This distribution would feel dynamic because if you're in the middle, you have something to look for and try to attain. And if you're on the end, you would feel good about the fact that not many people have what you have, and it would really suck to lose it. And in a game like Tarkov that is all about loss, a healthy loop is you circulating through that mid to high tier zones back and forth. In Tarkov right now, however, it seems like we have the opposite of a bell curve. Very few people run mid-tier kits. Most are running the best stuff in the game or extremely budget options. This is because if you have enough time to get to max traders, you just always have access to the best gear in the game. And if you don't have time, mid-tier gear probably isn't worth running because of how effective high-tier gear is. So you just run ultra budget, or you're new to the game and that's all you have access to. Now, if we go back to the original point, which is that armor feels super tanky now, and we look at it through this lens, I think we can make an argument that we can fix armor feeling too tanky without changing the armor itself, but rather changing the distribution of it. If it really was a bell curve, that would actually have an effect on the time to kill. If more people were wearing tier 4 armor with tier 2 soft armor underneath, then the time to kill would come down quite a bit on average while still maintaining the pros of the new armor change, like less armpit one taps and more skill requirement. But it would maintain those things with that slightly lower time to kill, making armor feel less tanky. And it would also leave in the ability to, every now and again, get a really good armor that occasionally gives you the cool experience of feeling pretty tanky. In my opinion, you want there to be some armors that feel really tanky. It gives you something to chase after because you want that for yourself, and it also breaks up the monotony of fights. I think what we should be shooting for is a dynamic experience, the classic aspect of Tarkov of you never know what you're going to run into. And I think a lot of the frustrations stem from the fact that the experience feels pretty flat right now. And that is because we are all largely fighting in that last part of the bell curve. This is also why most of the solutions I've heard probably won't help. If we buff ammo or nerf armor, we still get a relatively flat experience, just in reverse. Armor will go from feeling too OP to not feeling meaningful in most fights, like it was most of this year, because in most fights, we can assume that our opponent probably has the best stuff. A sentiment that I've seen a lot recently is, people complain when armor wasn't worth it, and now people are complaining that it's too powerful. Stop complaining and pick a side. This is happening because as long as the majority of players have access to the best gear in the game all of the time, both sides of the coin end up feeling flat and boring, even if they are radically different experiences. To illustrate this point, think of these two scenarios. In scenario 1, everyone at max traders unlocks an ammo with 70 pen and 100 damage. If this happened, combat in the game would get incredibly boring because armor would functionally cease to exist, and the time to kill would be incredibly static because it would only take 1 or 2 shots to kill. Now, in scenario 2, the only ammo that you have available from the traders has 1 pen and 1 damage. In this situation, armor would be insane, and you could never reasonably pen a high tier armor. This would also get extremely frustrating and boring. Now, obviously these are dramatic examples, and that's not how Tarkov is right now. But the point is to show that even though these would be wildly different experiences, they would both ultimately suck and be boring because every fight would feel the same. As long as we are all fighting at that end of the bell curve, whatever thing has a slight advantage, whether that be ammo or armor, is what's going to get used the most, and that's just going to get boring. In my opinion, the solution is to widen the playing field so that we are not all just fighting all the way up at the top of the curve. A potential solution to this, and this is not a fleshed out idea by the way, it's important to not get bogged down in the weeds of this idea. This could not work or other changes would have to come alongside it. This is just an example, but a potential solution to all of this would be to mostly or completely remove tier 5 and 6 plates from the traders. And since they're already banned off the flea market, that would mean that you would have to find these things in raid to use them. This means that the average armor would move down towards something like level 4, and the time to kill on average would come down a bit as well. But it leaves the door open to find these better armors in raid, and therefore create a more dynamic experience. This does a ton of good things to the game in my opinion, but I want to focus on the two big ones. It is a much more fair rewarding of time, and it fixes Tarkov's progression problem. Let me explain. Personally, it is a much more fair rewarding of time. The more you play, the more you find, but you are not boxed out of good gear if you don't play a lot. I know that people often see me as someone who is out of touch with casual players, and to an extent, that's true, right? I have played this game for over 8,000 hours, and I don't really remember what it's like to be new, and I wasn't new in the Tarkov that we have today. However, after 8,000 hours of Tarkov, my view of the game is that it is way too easy for people with thousands of hours to grind, and not nearly as rewarding as it should be for the people that don't have that time to put into the game. One of the big points of this idea is that I want to have to work harder to get the best gear consistently, and I want more casual players to have the ability to find it more naturally and not have to rely on grinding hundreds of hours to get it. And I honestly think that this makes everyone's life better. It gives purpose to the grinders and no-lifers in the end of the wipe, and it puts a carrot at the end of the stick for the more casual players. Now, this is another extreme example, but it will illustrate my point. If Class 6 armors were locked behind having to play for 500 hours in a single wipe, and when you hit that 500 hour mark, you can just buy Class 6 armors for 1 ruble. That creates two relatively static camps of people. People that will have infinite amounts of the best armor in the game, and people that will never have enough time to grind that out. The casuals get 0, the grinders get infinite. Then if we change this so that level 6 armor is not purchasable, but only found in raid, on bosses, and locked rooms, and airdrops, and high traffic areas, and in stashes, well now things are different. This has decreased the amount of armors that a grinder can get, and increased the amount that a more casual player can get. Now at least the grinder has to consistently work and risk their gear to get this good stuff, and a more casual player can sometimes find it in a stash or airdrop or in a keyed room, or they might kill a boss and get a huge come up. Now, the no-lifer will always have more good gear than the casual player. You can't get around the fact that if you play the game more, you will have more stuff, And that is okay. I actually think that that's how it should be. But in this scenario, the amount that the grinder has more is proportional to the amount of time that they play and the skill that they have. Instead of one group having almost infinite and one group having virtually none, if I play 3 times as much as you, I might find 3 times as much endgame gear. But I also play 3 times as many raids, so it balances out a little bit. It also leaves room for more skill expression. I currently have as much, if not more, god tier armor as Landmark, Glorious, Desmond, Willers, even though all of those players are much, much better than I am. And that's because once you cross the arbitrary line of XP, now we all have virtually infinite access to the gear. In theory, since those players are better than me and they're winning more fights than I am, they would probably have more gear saved up in their stash. Once again, in this system, not only does it do a better job of rewarding casual players for engaging with the game, but it also does a better job at rewarding higher skilled players relative to their skill. What's weird is that it seems like BSG understands that they don't want people running around with the best stuff all the time. They have many times moved a good gun or good ammo up from being behind level 4 traders to being behind some super high level quests, but this fundamentally misunderstands the problem, in my opinion, and only makes things worse. It does not change the mechanic of having 0 access to something and then suddenly having a bunch of access to it. It just arbitrarily moves that line somewhere else, and it continues to box out the players that have a hard enough time even getting max traders. So all of that is to say, yes, I am not a casual gamer and I might be an out of touch streamer, but this idea doesn't come from trying to make my life easier. It's that my life is too easy and yours is too hard. And I think that there can be a system that feels more natural and rewarding for all players. Now, you might be one of those no-lifers with thousands of hours in the game, and you hear everything that I just said and think, well, if you take all the best stuff from the traders, then what am I even progressing for? So let's talk about progression. But before we do, ask yourself these questions. Have I ever complained that there isn't anything to do late wipe? Have I ever wondered what Tarkov's endgame is going to be? Do I like early wipe and how that feels more than late wipe? Progression is a core part of Tarkov. You want to level up to get better items from the traders to feel more powerful. And I think that is a really good thing and a really strong aspect of this game. But I think that the pendulum has swung too far this way, and it has the unintended side effect of flattening the experience in multiple ways. What we often forget is that a core part of the Tarkov experience is the loss of progression. I got this cool loot and I lost it, and that sucks, and that makes me want to go out and find more cool loot. It's one of the reasons that we love early wipe so much. These things feel special because we don't have access to them. When you kill a juicer with a good armor and a good gun, it feels so good, not only because you don't have access to that loot otherwise, but also because you know that that was probably his best kit and you get to take it from him. In the late wipe, you don't care about either of those things because you have a stash full of the good stuff and you know he probably does too. I think that the 10,000 foot view meta progression of Escape from Tarkov, of skills, trader levels, quests, Kappa, and Lightkeeper are all great and they give you something to do, but I think that the gear progression has gotten a little extreme. Once you get to max traders, you have access to the best everything. And even though those things might be limited to only somewhere between 1 and 3 purchases per reset, there are so many good things that you can just cycle them. This also incentivizes more time in the menu and not more time in the game. The guy with the most good ammo is the guy who launches the game the most amount of times to buy ammo on reset, not the guy who went out to get the most good ammo. All of this interacts with another huge problem that Tarkov has, which is that late wipe is boring and there's no end game. These are things that we've heard a ton over the year. Once you complete all the quests that you want to do, there's really nothing left to do other than PvP because there is nothing that you want that you can't just buy off the flea market or from the traders. There is no gameplay loot left other than farming XP for no real reason, farming money for no real reason, or just push PvP nonstop until the end of the wipe. This is because we put the end game on the traders. It would be cool if when you accomplish your goal for the wipe, whether that's Kappa or max traders or whatever, then you start the end game, which is the never-ending chase for the best gear in the game that you find, you use, you lose, and then you go find again. Ultimately, I want to preserve the feeling of progression in Tarkov. I always want players to feel like they're being rewarded for the time they put into the game. But we have to ask ourselves, what are we progressing towards? Is what we're chasing actually going to ruin the fun of Tarkov or enhance it? In single player games, you want to progress up to the most powerful stuff in the game because it means that you are more powerful than everything else, and that power fantasy is fun. And it works because you are the only one playing the game. But is that what a game like Tarkov needs? Is Tarkov more or less fun with everybody running around with the exact same kit on? To quote the movie The Incredibles, when everybody is super, no one is. Now, while those are the two big things I think that limiting the best armor does, there are a ton of other ways that this could benefit the game. BSG could creatively distribute the endgame gear in a way that promotes moving around to different maps all the time instead of just playing one map over and over again. They could make airdrops actually worth fighting over. Bosses would be actually worth fighting for more than just the XP that they give. They could do all sorts of cool events where endgame gear is in shortage or spawning all over a specific map. And it would finally give value to something other than just treasure items and rubles. And if all of this is done right, there would be so many different ways to attempt to get this gear that no matter how you play Tarkov, there would be something fun for you to do to try to get your hands on some of the cool loot. Like I said at the beginning, I really want to know what you think about this. Am I way off the mark or am I onto something here? And what did I miss? I know that there are tons of little loopholes or things that would need to be addressed. Ammo would obviously have to be looked at if we made such sweeping changes to armor, and there would still be the problem of the gear economy bloating as the wipe progresses, but it would hopefully be much more meaningful. These same ideas could be applied to ammo, guns, and attachments, which could potentially just 4x all the benefits that I just listed. The game could feel even more dynamic with even more things to do, and hopefully feel more rewarding to all players. Thank you so much for sticking around and taking the time to check out this video. If you like it, think about dropping a like, commenting down below, or subscribing to the channel for more content like this. I stream Escape from Tarkov about 6 days a week here on YouTube and over on Twitch. All my links will be down below. If you're looking for people to play Tarkov with, our Discord's an awesome place to be. That link is down below as well. Thank you again for stopping by, and I will definitely see y'all on the next one.